Thank you, Mayor. Let's bow our heads. Our Father, we're thankful for the many blessings that you've brought into our lives. We're thankful to be able to live in a free country. Father, we know there's a lot of things going on in the world. And Father, we also know that this virus is mutating constantly as we speak. And we still have those out there that are in danger. We ask you to continue to protect all of us, Father, from this virus. Heal those that need healing, be with those that need protecting. Father, we also ask you to be with our military, bring them home safe, to be with their families here, and protect us here at home. Father, we ask all these things in your most precious name. Amen.
Okay, ask Councilman Don Helms if he'll lead us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we appreciate each and every one of you coming, and especially our distinguished guest. We have our Corps of Engineers representatives here and Pivot Parking. So we're going to learn a lot today, right?
We got Mr. Ward, too. He's distinguished.
Yeah, and Mr. Ward, he's distinguished. He's just distinguished, that's all.
Extinguished.
But anyway, so first up is beach nourishment. You want to start it off, Kyle? Or just turn it over to them?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, and good morning, council members.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wait a minute, we better approve the agenda first. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I was so excited about hearing this first topic.
So, very good. Thank you again. Pam Castens, our project manager, is here to give us an update post understanding the project sort of change with North Topsail dropping out. So I'll just turn it over to Pam if you'll kind of talk to council and give us an update of what you got.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
So thanks for the opportunity to come in and kind of brief you all on where we are. I know that it's been a long haul already, but North Topsail Beach's decision to withdraw from the federal project at least kind of clears the way for us to now really hit the ground and make some tracks. So from that standpoint, I think we're looking pretty good. We have discussed as a group, as a partnership in the past over the course of this year to year and a half, what would happen if this situation came up. So our next steps essentially involve validating that a standalone project within Surf City is still economically justified, that the change in scope of the project is within the discretion of the Chief of Engineers to approve, and move forward with the documentation that lays that all out for the record, gives us the thumbs up, and then will allow us to move into execution of a project partnership agreement with the town of Surf City. So I think on the upside, I want to make it very clear that the Corps of Engineers vertical team has also been talking about this potential eventuality over the course of the last 6 months to a year. So we've been coordinating on this. We've had some very recent calls to talk about how to get these next steps off the ground. I don't have some real nitty-gritty specifics for you today, but I will say that the intent is going to be to leverage all of the work and the information that we have, not reinvent the wheel in putting our documentation together. I think that this validation report is going to definitely benefit from the updated analysis and documentation that we just completed to get the project partnership agreement pulled together. So the letter report that's got all the real estate inventoried in it, the cost information, we will go back and update our certified project costs just to reflect a Surf City only project. But we're going to be able to really roll over a lot of that information into the validation report. So I think another positive here is that as this project was funded under the DRA 19 supplemental bill, I think that's going to give us a little more flexibility in coming up with an expedited process to get this validation report into the hands of our higher headquarters. So my next step essentially is is to set up a call with our division office, probably late next week, because next week is a regional governance meeting. Senior leadership within the division are meeting in Atlanta. This is on the agenda. It's always on the agenda, to be honest with you, just to be briefed for a status. So any final direction on our specifics on our next steps may come out of that regional governance discussion next week. But by the end of next week, we'll have a meeting scheduled to actually talk with our division office about the specifics, the scope of the validation report, again, to try to see how we can streamline it, and we'll develop a timeline for submittal of that report out of those discussions. So that is going to be our next steps, and I will absolutely, each step of the way, make sure that I work closely with you and keep the town updated and apprised of what our schedule is and what our next steps are.
May I ask you a question?
Please.
The timeline you mentioned, I know you said you couldn't give a lot of specifics, but do you think this is going to affect the validation process that we're going to have to go through to stand alone? Is that going to push our timeline down the road further than what we'd anticipated and we had expected to start off with the project?
Well, we were originally on a track. What we were shooting for was execution of the project partnership agreement no later than first week in August, so we could get a contract out onto the street to get ready to place sand on 1 December. That's not going to happen now. We need that project partnership agreement signed in order for you all to complete that real estate process, and I know we're close, but we still need to get that cost-sharing agreement signed so we can move forward into the contract acquisition process. So from that standpoint, yes, it's going to affect that timeline. Our validation process will require updated environmental compliance documentation. Again, that's not necessarily bad news. We were already in the middle of doing that. So we've got a draft environmental assessment. We're going to be seeking permission to go with no environmental window in terms of dredging for the initial construction process. So our environmental folks are now going to be working on revising that document to reflect a project description for Surf City only. We're going to get that document out onto the street as soon as we can, work that in parallel with the validation process. And so it's our intent, our hope and our intent, if we can successfully get through that process, that we'll be able to put a construction contract out on the street to get started without any constraints, window constraints. So yes, we're going to have a delay in actually starting to place sand on the beaches. We're hoping that that delay is going to be minimal, i.e. that we're not going to have to wait a whole year. So we're going to be working those processes in parallel and doing our best to successfully, again, get a streamlined path to placing sand.
So you mentioned that, so y'all have evidently heard back from the wildlife on moving that window or removing that window of opportunity.
We have not. That document has not gone out onto the street yet. It was scheduled to go out onto the street in, I believe it was June. We had to hold it up because we didn't want to put a draft environmental assessment out onto the street for a project that included 10 miles, a 10-mile-long project, if the project was going to be a 6-mile-long project. So we had to hold up release until we heard back from North Topsail Beach. Now that we have, we'll have to revise that draft before we go out onto the street. When we put it out on the street, then we'll directly engage with the resource agencies in hearing their concerns and kind of working through those to complete the process.
So it would be safe to say that our project will start in 2022.
It would be safe to say that the project wouldn't start before 2022. Honestly, I really can't.
I'm not trying to.
I can't put a hard and fast. I'm certainly going to say to you, that's what that's what I'm going to shoot for. But of course, we've got to get through the process. We've got to get the approvals. And again, in terms of risk factors, I think there's a definite plus there that, again, our vertical team is engaged and stands in strong support in working with our team to try to get this moved forward. They are very, very much aware of how much work has already been done on this project. So from my standpoint, I'm hopeful that we can get through that process fairly quickly. It's not going to be a 2-month process, but you know, we're going to do our best to move through it as fast as we can, and again, in parallel, work the environmental compliance. So when we get the approval to proceed, hopefully we'll have that environmental compliance process done. We'll have the project partnership agreement revised to reflect Surf City only. Those are very straightforward changes. We'll have our letter report. We can go ahead right now and start revising that. All those numbers are very fresh. So, you know, all of that's good and should line up really very neatly. So I think all of those are positive signs supporting, hopefully, a fairly streamlined process, expedited process.
Okay, now Pam, the reason we hadn't signed the paper is because it was not ready for us to sign it, right? Because we were waiting on North Topsail?
Yes, the reason that neither Surf City nor North Topsail, we needed to get final approval, the thumbs up from our division office that it was ready to sign. In order to do that, there's a requirement to notify Congress of our intent to execute a PPA. Congress has 7 days notification period. So our division office was waiting to get the conceptual thumbs up from both towns that they were ready to sign before telling Congress we were on that. That was our intent. We could not get that from North Topsail. So,
Right. Okay.
so yes, we were ready to sign it, but we couldn't sign it because North Topsail was just not comfortable giving us the thumbs up that they would be good to go.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, anybody else got some questions for Pam? I just want to say, we all appreciate the hard work that you and the Corps has done on our project. And I know how hard you worked on it, and we appreciate it, sure do. Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
Mr. Ward.
I got a couple of questions. One, how many agencies does the environmental paper have to go through, and how long do they have to respond? And two, would it do any good for us to go talk to the journal and allow the pressure down or get everybody on the boat and get it?
I'll answer the second question first and say no, because right now, I don't see any bottlenecks or any constraints on our side that need command assistance to try to pave the way. Relative to the resource agencies, we would need to work with certainly the state resource agencies. We've got Fish and Wildlife Service. We've got National Marine Fisheries Service. I think the longest pole in the tent is going to be Section 7 consultation, Endangered Species Act consultation, to go year-round dredging. So we've got a biological assessment already drafted to cover that coordination. So as soon as that draft document goes out onto the street, that process will officially kick off. Fish and Wildlife has 135 calendar days to get through that process. Our environmental folks have already been speaking with Fish and Wildlife Service to try to, I mean, that's their statutory timeline that they have in law. And oftentimes they're willing to work with us and get a biological opinion back to us, you know, faster. So again, I can't commit to them, but if anything, you know, to answer your question, that's probably on the environmental side, you know, the longest pole in the tent.
Have you had any discussions with them preliminarily?
Yes, our environmental folks have.
Any kind of feedback?
I'm sure they've gotten feedback. I mean, I'm not really prepared to talk or really aware of a lot of the details in terms of where they may have concerns, but to the extent that feedback, I'm sure that outputs of that, conclusions of that early coordination, you know, our environmental folks have tried to proactively work and address in that draft document. So, and those conversations, informal discussions will continue to be had as we work on the rescope as well.
One last question. As far as Surf City goes, are we where we need to be to move this forward at this time?
In what regard?
In whatever we need to do as far as parking space, real estate, or whatever the case may be.
So, yeah, I mean, Kyle and I are working fairly closely together on that. We'll go out, as part of the validation process, we'll go out and validate that the parking and access is in place. That was our intent to do immediately after signing the PPA anyway. So I can't really answer that question until our team goes out and puts eyes on and says yes. I've been all through the town. You guys have done an amazing job at striping and signing public parking spaces and such. So we'll confirm that you're where you need to be, and if not, again, we'll work closely to make sure that any gaps are closed before we get to a point where we're ready to go to construction.
Thank you.
Pam, so what I'm hearing is we would have one, it wouldn't be broken up into phases. Once we start, you're hoping to knock it out all at one time
So that's a good
with
question.
one mobility.
That's a good question. Our original construction acquisition approach was 3 contracts, 2 in Surf City and 1 in the town of North Topsail Beach. That acquisition strategy was driven by a number of factors, wanting to get out there as soon as possible, the timeline for the environmental compliance. Therefore, first contract was going to be according to our standing commitments while we worked the other document. I think at this point, we would be maybe open to considering construction of the whole Surf City shoreline in one contract. I think that's a possibility. We may still split it into 2 contracts depending on total volumes and cost considerations and those kinds of things. So those decisions really haven't been made yet. I think we'll get a better handle on that as we move forward into updating the actual certified project cost. And we'll look we'll probably do a quick value engineering look to see what the most efficient approach is going to be from a cost and a timing standpoint in getting a project built. So we've got, I think, more options now.
Should we consider getting a letter from the Sea Turtle Sanctuary as far as, hey, we're going to support this project. We want Surf City to finish this project, having their backing, saying, they're not going to hold us up. Like before, when we were pumping or bringing in the sand, they agreed, hey, we want this to be done. Our turtles need a place to hatch. Should we go ahead and move forward with getting a letter from like the Sea Turtle Sanctuary saying, a year-long project, they're on board with it?
Letters of support, I think, never hurt. It might be a better idea to hold up until that draft is out on the street, and then the letter can reference that document and say, hey, we've looked at it and we agree that we think that this is a solid approach and there really isn't any, negative effects, and that might be an important consideration or piece of information that the resource agencies can factor in as they work with us through the endangered species process. So that's probably what I would recommend, is kind of maybe trying to get a letter like that when the draft is out for review.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ward, I've got one last question. That's about the elephant in the room. What happens if we have another Florence event? Does the Corps have to go back and redesign the whole project, whatnot, before?
No, we're not going to go back and redesign the project. So if you have another Florence event before the project partnership agreement is signed, I think that, if you have another Florence type event before we go to construction, then our pre-construction surveys, if no other interim projects are put in place, our pre-construction surveys would reflect the additional volumes needed to offset the effects of the storm.
So it wouldn't create a delay?
Nope. Nope. So again, we'll make sure that we keep you updated, but I think we're in fairly good shape with all the recent analyses that have been done, all the information that we've got. So we're going to be working fast and furious and continue to engage our division office so that they're with us as we move forward, and try to pave the way. And I should have done this at the beginning, but I would like to introduce Ms. Florence Kessel. She's with me here today from the Corps. She is the team's project management assistant, and she actually absolutely plays anchor on this project in terms of supporting the project delivery team. So I appreciate the fact that she's here with me today, and I did want to introduce her to you all. Any other questions that you have, please, I know you know this, please just reach out and call me, text me, anytime, and I'll be happy to come back and answer questions here. Obviously, I'll be working closely with Kyle and Mayor, you, and any of the other council members as needed.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions you got?
No, sir,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you, and I think you covered it very well, and going to get us out of the predicament we're in. Thank you. Okay. Have we got anybody here from WK Dixon, or are you going to deliver it?
Just real quick on the Beach Nourishment Committee.
Oh, okay.
We kind of rolled it into one item, somewhat related, but we've been meeting with the Beach Nourishment Committee twice over the last month, excuse me. And through our first meeting, we gave the committee a full update on where we were at with the federal project, because that committee had sat dormant over the year prior while the town was really working on administrative tasks with the Corps. So when we met, we introduced them to the federal project, but also brought them up to speed with the North Carolina Coastal Resiliency Program and the grant efforts that are going to help the town and the entire island really move forward in identifying resiliency approaches and projects that we can take on in the future. So our last meeting was to obtain consensus from the committee to sort of officially take that additional task on. And with that, a recommendation to rename the committee to the Surf City Shoreline and Resiliency Committee. That way it somewhat reflects the additional responsibilities that they'll be looking at. So wanted to bring forth that recommendation to the council. Also, within the memo, you'll note that I did note that Kathy Zagzebski, excuse me, with the Sea Turtle Hospital has shown interest in serving on the committee. I asked her to correspond with Ms. Beasley to potentially replace her. So she'll be an asset to this committee, especially as we start talking about environmental windows and getting them on board with that project. So I guess just looking for consensus from council to rename the committee. The appointments are on here, and as those need to be updated, certainly the clerk will bring those forth to you. So,
You want a consensus or a vote? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we change the name of the Beach Nourishment Committee.
Second.
And all in favor, raise your hand. I can vote. All of it's approved.
all right. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor and council, and we'll continue to move forward with that committee and keep you abreast of any actions that are occurring with them. So,
Okay.
thank you.
And I see that WK Dixon is here, so I'll turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and distinguished council members. I appreciate you allowing me to present virtually today. Would appreciate Kyle talking about the word resiliency, as that was a big part of the study that we worked with the town on South Shore Drive. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully my screen will show up. So back in mid-2019, so almost about 2 years ago, we entered into a contract partnership with the town, and our other partner was NCDOT, to help us further understand both the level and extent of flooding on South Shore Drive and potential options and alternatives that we could look at to help alleviate that flooding, in addition to what DOT currently has out there as far as the infiltration dischargers. We began working on the study in 2019. think as everybody's aware, back around late 2019, DOT had some funding issues, so we kind of put this project on pause until we could finalize it. Once funding was back in place at the beginning of this year, we worked with Kyle and DOT to proceed forward with this report and study, and we completed it around early this month. So it's a lovely 88 pages. If you can't sleep at night, it's a great read. But I'm going to try to keep this a high-level summary. Of course, there's a lot of technical information with this report, and you're welcome to stop me. And if you want to ask some technical questions, I'll be happy to go into some details as needed. But the premise of this report or analysis was to look at 7 identified flooding sites on South Shore Drive. These flooding sites were both reviewed by the town and NCDOT, and of course by us as well during high rain events. And we looked at potential ways that we could take the water that was flooded on the road and either pump it and remove it and pump it out towards the sound or infiltrate it. So as you read through the report, we've identified 9 potential sites that can either infiltrate this water or collect this water and pump and discharge it. When I'm talking about infiltration, especially from on the coastal side, we mentioned a lot in this report about the dune infiltration systems. I wanted to take 1 minute to kind of keep high level review what we mean by dune infiltration systems. I have here a just quick PowerPoint that shows some of the visuals of some of the underground dune infiltration systems that we reference in the report. So here at this particular slide, we're showing a road such as South Shore Drive filling up. We have a pump system in place that would pump that water down and then pump it into an infiltration system, whether that be in the dune or whether it be in the primary dunes or secondary dune systems. And that then pumps the water off the road into the dune system that's above the seasonal high water table and would allow that water to infiltrate into the dune system. Here's a kind of another cross section of these infiltration chambers. As you can tell, our goal with these infiltration chambers is to keep them above the seasonal high water table, about at least a minimum of 2 feet, to ensure that we have the ability for that water to infiltrate into the surrounding dune system. We have, and of course, somebody can ask, hey, wait a minute, this all sounds nice in theory, but does it actually work? Here are a couple pictures down from Caswell Beach that just recently installed a dune infiltration system. This is a picture showing some of these, some of the chambers and the lightweight chambers that are easy to be installed within the dune system. So once we get the plans together and get all the permits together, the overall installation of these systems is pretty quick, which means it's actually a pretty overall relatively inexpensive construction. So here's a drone view of these dune infiltration systems getting installed. If you're familiar with Caswell Beach, the location of this site is right across from the Oak Island Lighthouse. And this picture showing a cross section, you can imagine as we are pumping water into these chambers, the chambers fill up with water, and then the surrounding sand underneath, and there's actually 57 stone underneath that geotextile fabric that you see, really just sucks up the water. And here's a picture of the replaced dune. Of course, we have vegetation on it at this point, but if you were walking by it, you probably couldn't even tell anything was there, except for maybe looking at a manhole. So going back to the report, we did evaluate these different sites a total of 9 different sites looking at can we utilize some town-owned lots, beach access, are there some other potential private vacant lots that we could implement these infiltration systems, or could we use the existing private pond system on the sound side? As we perform this analysis, and I won't go into the details of all the different aspects we analyzed, we did come up with the priority of sites that we recommended to the town that we should implement, including the first priority being sites 4 and 6, which are both town-owned properties. And then working our way, starting with town-owned properties, then working our way in order of priority to ultimately private property. Site 4, first one that we recommend here in South Shore Drive is utilizing the 1815 South Shore Drive. I believe currently there's a parking lot, a new parking lot there. It's a town-owned parking lot. We recognize that we could utilize that space, put infiltration chambers underneath that parking lot, and that could help target one of the main flooding areas on South Shore Drive. Similarly, the same recommendation for Site 6 as well, utilizing a town-owned lot to help kind of capture this flooding area. So, excuse me. So that is kind of the high-level summary of this report. I'll be happy to take questions or provide any additional detail as needed.
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I do. This is Councilman Torres. So is there, do we have a timeline? Are we going forward with the contract? What's the next step?
Yeah, so next step will be our continued work with our project partners in DOT. That's really going to be a primary driver of this, because ultimately it's trying to get water off of their road. One thing I can say is that the town has put ourselves in a fantastic position, because a lot of the sites identified by Mark and his team are town-owned properties, especially on South Shore where we just put parking in. A lot of these infiltration projects will go directly under that parking. So what we'll do is, now that we have the study, DOT's been waiting for this, and that's kind of the whole reason why the setup was there. DOT didn't have the funds to even pay for this. We did, and we'll get reimbursed from them. But they'll be able to hopefully start scheduling some of these projects to move forward. There's a hierarchy of implementation and recommendations to do the entire thing. So once I start talking with DOT, getting their understanding and their commitment to it, then we can start looking at what our responsibility on implementing the project will be. And then if council wants to move forward and start budgeting for capital projects in this partnership agreement with DOT, then I will bring that forward to you.
Does the report also include the cost?
It does. Yeah, preliminary cost estimates for each site, which range from approximately, I guess, about $200,000 to $400,000. Some being a little bit more complex with the mechanical systems that go into place with the pump and piping and things of that nature. But we have severely reduced that with already owning a lot of the properties in which this can be utilized. So.
Okay. Is this a report we can
Absolutely.
share?
I will get this over to you. There was a couple of final tweaks that I think we got hammered out just so that we can have some public consumption with it. But I will get this over to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else got a question?
When this starts and we start the project, I guess this is for Kyle or it could be for you, how long is it going to take?
That's really going to be up to the aggressive nature in which DOT wants to put funding on it, and how much they're going to do. that's going to drive everything. I mean, we could do one project a year, we could do 2 projects a year, we could do one every other year. But ultimately, if they've done the calculations and this is going to be a approach that's going to mitigate that flooding, then we can incrementally start reducing that, hopefully, with the biggest bang for our buck, first would be my recommendation. So, and I think that the report has laid that out. We've looked at these sites and understand where they're at and what they can handle as far as volume of stormwater. So this puts us in a much better place, a sort of an end goal to the quandary, I think, of South Shore flooding over the years. So.
And we're targeting the worst ones.
Yes, sir.
First is
Yes,
what we're
sir.
doing.
Yes, sir.
So that'll hopefully alleviate a lot of the major problems when we get these first ones done.
Yeah, and
There's 3 of them that are pretty serious. So.
yes, yep. Things that we've tried, other alternative measures, from a notification system, just alerting motorists that it's high water. We've applied for a couple of grants, have not been successful with that, but now that we have this document, that leverages us to be able to move forward in the project. And Mark, thank you for the presentation, and he's been gracious enough to set up a sort of a field trip per se to Caswell Beach on Monday. So Price and to Price's crew working with WK and DOT on those basins have been fantastic. But Price and myself and the mayor and Stephanie are going to go see that project down in Caswell Beach and see how that's working on Monday morning. So
Thank you, sir.
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anything else, Mark?
Thank you for your time. Now I look forward to seeing some folks on Monday.
I certainly appreciate you being online. Sure do.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Pivot Parking has been patiently sitting and waiting and learning a lot, right?
Learning a lot about stormwater.
I'll let you introduce yourself and your crew with you.
Okay. We're gonna connect here and. All right, there it is. It gave me the thumbs up. Good morning. I am Tina Reed. I am the Executive Vice President for Pivot Parking. I'm here with our Surf City Management team, who we'll introduce here in just a few minutes. But I'm here to give you a mid-season report that'll give you some data for parking and some of our observations through March through June data. Our founder, Scott Diggs, could not be here. He wanted me to express his apologies for not being able to be here. He's out of town today. Couple things that we're going to discuss is the implementation and the transition process that we went through. The paid parking when it began, some of the things that we went through. We'll have some mid-season data review of transient and season pass sales and such. Then we're going to go over some observations and some considerations for the next parking season. Implementation and our transition. So we began with March 22nd. Did not do paid parking until April 1st, but March 22nd is when we began with our management team and started doing online resident parking registrations and hurricane re-entry registrations, and then season pass sales began. We assisted the town to establish the parking areas again, hired our staff, and then worked with our text-to-park vendor to develop the mobile payment platform with our parking codes, and then worked with the vendor to get signage and to get that signage installed as well. The resident registrations, hurricane re-entry, and season pass sales. Here gives you the information about each type. The online residents, we were able to utilize an online system where residents could register. There are no permits that are issued to the residents. It is virtual, using their license plates as their permits. There's 2 registrations per resident address at no cost. And then additional, if they require an additional up to 2 more, it's $100 each. The online hurricane re-entry registrations, this is a physical decal that is applied to the front windshield. Residents only living on the island are allowed to have those re-entry registrations and the decals. It's limited to 2 per resident address, and there's no cost. The online season pass sales, excuse me, physical decal is applied to the back windshield. We did back windshield for season passes and front windshield for re-entries to distinguish between the two. Non-residents are those that are purchasing the online season passes. There's also the 10% discount that applies to the military, senior citizen, and ETJ residents. Those costs are $250 for regular price. Then we did the online commercial parking in the central business district, again, using the virtual, doing the license plates instead of a decal. The initial 4 are at no cost, and then it breaks down that if they register 5 through 9, it's $100, 10 through 14 is $75, and then above 15 is $50 each. We assisted the town with providing some informational flyers and information for residents on how to do the online registration, as well as the season pass registrations. We developed the parking payment codes. Currently, you have 6 codes right now. Surf A is for the 2-hour limited spaces. Surf B, which we call the Bats Lot, is on North Shore Drive, began on May the 7th. Surf C is Christopher Lot, which is next to Hot Diggity, began May 1st. Surf D is all the beach access areas and other parking lots. Surf City is on-street spaces, what we consider actually on the street or right next to the street in certain areas. And then Surf E is the Miller Lot at Hula's, which began late May. We also developed in the text to park, we did some informational packets and marketing slicks to be able to provide the customers, and the town did a great job of promoting these on social media of how it works. We took an ambassador approach in our first few days in our first month of April to instruct people how this works, how you can text, how you can use the QR code. And it's a step-by-step process. The first time you ever use it, it takes a couple of steps, but then after you've registered and you've got in, then it's just a couple of steps after that. You just you text the code to the number, you get a message back, and you start your session if you've already registered your license plate. So it's pretty simple. Little fact finding here, by the end of 2021, mobile payments, m-commerce, was expected to account for 54% of nationwide e-commerce sales. So due to COVID and the pandemic and everyone kind of going to the contactless method, you see this big, huge ramp up. So the town of Surf City is in that mode where we're doing everything by phone for the parking and online. I'd like to introduce our staff, and we have them here today. Roger Cozine is our operations manager. Jackie McDonald is our assistant operations manager, and Corinne Zurcher is our senior operations manager. So you'll see them in and about day after day out with the team. We also have a vast amount of, or I say vast, we have a team of ambassadors that we've hired. Some are part-time, some are full-time. You see them out and about as well. Surf City developed the parking map, which has been really great, and we appreciate that. It's showing where all the parking areas are. The latest map also includes a QR code that can be scanned and take you into the online mapping system. So we began paid parking on April the 1st. Town staff assisted with the installation of the posts, and then our staff got signage up. We did an ambassador enforcement approach for the first 30 days. So no tickets were written in the first 30 days. We did warnings only to get everyone into the mode of how you do it. We assisted customers with how you did it, if you have questions and such. We continued the resident registrations and hurricane reentry registrations, as well as the season pass sales and the addition of the commercial CBD vehicle registrations. And then we always continue the development of spaces where we can look at the assessment of where we are and how we can add spaces and such. We're going to go over some mid-season data. We're going to have transient data, resident data, and season pass data. So in April, total transient text-to-park transactions were 8,424. Being that Surf D has your most spaces, it's going to always be your primary source of where transient transactions come from. So it's 80% of the transactions in April. On-street at that time was 14%, and Surf A, which is the 2-hour spaces, was 6%. Surf B and Surf C were not open at that time. In May, we went to 14,432 transactions, again with Surf D being the primary with 68%, and then on-street at 19%, and Surf A at 6%. June, we were at 14,356, again with Surf D being the primary at 69% and on-street being at 17%. Overall, April through June transactions have equaled 37,208. So those are transactions. You can somewhat equate to how many visitors did that equate to. It may not be exactly 37,000 visitors, but a transaction would be if someone started a session and it ended. It could be the same visitor if they stopped a session and then started a new session. If someone got a text message that they wanted to extend their session, that would still count as one transaction. So there's some relevancy there as to the number of visitors. And again, Surf D being the primary with 57%. Citation data. This is only for May and June, again, because we did not do citations in April. So far we've issued 3,193 citations. 1,421 are currently open right now. That means that those have not been, we have not received payment for those as of yet. There are letters that go out after a certain time period when a citation is not paid that lets them know that they still have an outstanding citation and payment is expected. We had so far 674 citations paid. 673 citations were contested. That means we received an appeal for someone that may have received a citation. Voids are only for technical issues. If a ambassador may have entered a license plate incorrectly with the wrong number, then we would void that particular one out, or if it was due to training. And then citations closed are all those that we've either appealed or made restitution on. Parking in motion. This is one of our ambassadors using our handheld system to research a license plate. They have a ticket system that they carry and it'll print out the ticket. We also take pictures. Every time we write a citation, we take at least 3 to 5 pictures. You take a picture of the license plate, you take a picture of any signage, you take a picture of if they were outside the lines, anything of that nature. So then we have those pictures. Someone contests their, appeals their citation, and then we let them see the pictures, and most of the time the picture speaks 1,000 words. So we have also now installed the LPR unit on the golf cart. So we have cameras on the back side of the golf cart. As we're riding around, it scans the license plates. It connects to our enforcement system, so it'll let us know. It connects to the payment system and lets us know if they do show a payment. It also has all of the resident data loaded into it, so it's registering all of those license plates for residents and let us know that those are residents, so that we're not writing citations for residents. Resident data. So far we have issued 1,757 re-entry decals to residents. We do have an additional 371 registrations that have not picked up the decals. So in total, we have 2,128 residents that have registered for their re-entry decals. The license plates that have been registered for parking for residents has totaled 4,620. That's for the initial 2 at no cost. The next slide here shows you that the residents, you would add the 240 to the existing 4,000 number I just gave you for the total number of resident registrations received for license plates for parking. These are the additional that were paid after the initial 2 at no cost. And this gives you a total of the passes sold for both resident, season, and commercial. As you'll see, April is in the teal color, so that's our primary of where we've been able to register and sell the most. And so there's been that initial fluctuation of where we've seen the most in April, a little bit in May, and then it's declined through June.
Before you get too far, I'm sorry, can you back up one slide?
Yep.
On the re-entry decals issued, you said 1,700, and you had another 3
Another 371 has not been picked up yet.
plus 371.
So that gives us a total of 2,128 registered.
Okay, do we know of how many? How many are outstanding is what I'm...
We do not know that because we don't have a list that says who registered in the previous years for the cards.
Okay.
So we don't know that expectation of how many was expected to be issued. What we're seeing is a lot of those that are actual living on the island that are here have picked up their decals. For the ones that are not, this is not their primary residence, so to speak, and they're living outside of the area. We've had a lot of requests if we can mail those, but that's an expense, and sometimes things get lost in the mail, so we're not keen on mailing them out as much as possible. So we're telling folks, kind of asking, when are you expected to come back to town? Make sure you come to see us, making sure we're open 7 days a week, 8:30 to 5:30, so that we're available for them to pick those up.
And any contractors part of that?
Contractors are not getting any passes at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Revenue per space. As of the end of June, there has been 733 spaces created throughout the town. Current revenue generated from March through June equates to $720.09 per space, or on a 3.5-month basis, $205.74 per month. So each space is generating $205 per month, so to speak. We anticipate with our budget and where we project that number probably will end up at the end of the season somewhere in the range of $230 to $250. So we're just depending on what our revenues do come in at. One thing I did not mention before with the citations, we also have been able to track residents that are utilizing paid parking spaces, and in the month of June, we were able to track that 984 residents were using paid parking spaces throughout the month of June.
Does that revenue include any, like violation
It
tickets?
includes all revenue.
Okay.
It includes all revenue. And some things here, the town has done a really great job of trying to delineate where the parking spaces are with yellow curbs and blue curbs for the handicap. We are still having some issues. Our observations are is that folks are so used to kind of parking wherever they wanted to at some point, that getting in line of park in front of a yellow curb and don't park, on one side of the yellow curb and trying to maximize as much space as we can. So we've made sure that our ambassadors are out there trying to make sure that when they see people parking and maybe they're not in the space correctly, we try to give them some, an indication that they need to try to park them directly in front of the curb so that we maximize the most space. Our office did move to the old police office so that we're able to maximize the space and assist customers. And right now, we're working with the town to do the Share the Space campaign so that we maximize space again. 2 golf carts can fit in one space. So if 2 golf carts can share a space, if you know each other, it's great. You can even get 4 golf carts in a space. If you're a family and you got 4 golf carts, you can get 4 golf carts. So we maximize the space if you know one another. So there's an ability to share that spacing to save it for others. Communication, again, the town has been gracious and with your social media platform in order for us to be able to push out any information that we need to. We're consistently working with Kyle and town staff with giving them updates on a weekly basis. And then our local team here is always available for phones and emails with our surfcityparking@pivotparking.com email. All right, some additional observations and considerations for the next parking season. We know that right now we need more signage. We have signage spaced out in some areas, and when you get on the really busy days, it's hard for some folks to actually see the signage that may be down a little bit due to the height of cars and things like that. So we're working on a plan on how we can initiate more signage and be cost effective on that. Better beach access wayfinding signage. We see folks that are not 100% familiar where all the public parking spaces are, do the kind of the stop and the go, and is this where I can park? Is this not where I can park? Especially on some of the beach access areas and such. So I believe the town's already kind of started working on some of those wayfinding options. Putting the generalized or the well-recognized P that just indicates public parking and some of the entrances to some of these areas will help with that as well. The campaign of where not to park, that is our biggest complaint right now, is because of the changes of no side street parking, no right-of-way parking in certain areas, and everyone was used to that. The concept or the perception from the general public is if there's not a sign that doesn't tell me I can't park, then I can park. But the perception needs to be switched in that if there's not a sign, that if there's no sign, don't assume that you can park. Look for the signage that says you can park. Directing traffic flow to the low-use lots. So we're, trying to come up with a plan that when the heavy beach access areas become inundated with cars, of directing folks of where can I go find it instead of just searching, so that they know a dedicated space where they can go to. Again, always expanding the parking areas. Where can we find and maximize the most in spacing, because the demand is higher than what's available. Something to consider for the possibility of next year's parking season, and what we'll do at the end of this season is do a rate analysis of where we are with the rates, what the recommendations or suggestions could be for where rates may need to increase or where rates may need to decrease. If you have lower use lots that are not being utilized and are further away from the beach, it's kind of like we talk about when you go to a concert and you pay for VIP seats versus nosebleed seats. Same kind of concept. So maybe we reduce some of the pricing in some of the lower use lots to help with those folks so there's a lower cost of parking, but it's a little further away. We will be changing the hurricane and season pass decals. Right now they adhere to the inside of the windshields. We're going to change those to adhere to the outside windshield so that they'll be much more visible. Right now we're having trouble with some of the window tint on some of the vehicles on the back windshields for the season pass, so we'll change those. And then, as always, the assessment of season start and end dates. Right now, your season starts April 1st and ends October 15th. Comparison to areas nearby, some seasons start March 1st and end of October. So looking at those things and what it could do, we'll do some projections at the end of the season. And then consideration of any resident parking changes. You have the data there, and at the end of the season, we'll be able to give you much more data for the entire season to make potential changes or recommendations as to how you might make changes to that program. And that's it. Open to any questions.
Okay, anybody got any questions for him?
I do.
You do? Yes.
First thing, I just want to say, worked with Jackie. She's been fantastic, and your ambassadors have been great. So I just want to make sure of that. But I do have a question for you. On a 1 to 10, 10 being great, how would you rate your implementation and transition with this parking process? Be careful, be careful.
I would rate it, honestly, about a 7.
Okay.
Okay. Wasn't 100% perfect. There were a lot of variables that we were up against. I think what we look at as a success is you needed paid parking to begin April 1st. That happened. There was, we had to work with the town, and there was we had an issue with some poles, trying to get enough poles to get signage up and such by that time period. So, and then just making people aware of how the changes were. A lot of folks come in and say, well, I had no idea that this paid parking now. I haven't, because they weren't here potentially maybe last year because of the pandemic, and things like that, and that they don't follow the social media. So there was a lot of education processes that needed to be done.
Yeah, I was I told the mayor and the mayor pro-tem, I've received 9 tickets in my own lot. I'm the lot behind my place for my wife and I's registered vehicles. Now they've taken care of those.
Okay.
But I would say that's problematic.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting those tickets and my vehicles were registered first a long time ago, then I can only imagine the frustration from other people, if that makes sense to you. So I'm hoping that you are making that a priority with your system to get that, quickly, and training your ambassadors too. I think that's important to do. Make sure you're constantly working on that. Because those of us in the central business district, they think our businesses are the pivot parking office, so we get to hear all about it. So if that makes sense to you. So
it does. So when we got the notice of intent to start, in getting an enforcement platform, it typically takes 8 to 10 weeks to get that, and we did not have that time period. So we used a different system in the beginning, and we've just recently made the switch to the one that we had wanted to start with. And so hopefully we'll see a lot of change in that, because it's a much more robust system and is able to recognize those plates and such. We are having a little bit of issue with connectivity right now and trying to decipher, is it more the connectivity issue with the system in itself, or just from a cell connectivity and such? So we're working through some of those issues.
And I'm happy that we're doing parking. I think you guys are doing a great job overall.
Thank you.
I just wanted to see what your thoughts were. So I think 7's where I would put you all to, for sure.
Okay.
All right, for sure. Thanks.
I've got a question as well. I had a resident contact me that received a a parking ticket for not parking in the right space.
Uh-huh.
So I obviously said, well, make sure you park in the right space going forward. However, she did pay. Her intent was to pay.
Okay,
So she paid,
okay,
got the ticket.
okay.
The fact that she got the ticket, she should be, in my opinion, reimbursed for paying if you're going to give her a ticket. Because to get both doesn't seem fair to me.
Every person that feels that they did not receive a ticket in justification has the right to appeal. And so we do have the appeal process. They can do the appeal online, they can come in and do the appeal, and then we'll look through that process and determine what's the best solution.
Yeah, but do you understand my point? If
I
she's
do.
going to be fined, even though she tried to pay or she did pay, then I think that she should be reimbursed and pay the fine.
Okay.
And she learned a lesson.
Okay,
And I'll communicate that to her to go ahead and go through the appeal process. That's all I have, but I do think that, it's been implemented. It was kind of something that we rushed. So, you take something and try to stand it up as fast as we did, you're going to have some of those issues. But I've met with some of your ambassadors on the road. I take every opportunity I can because I know they're doing a tough job. Nobody wants to give a fine. So I appreciate the efforts of your entire team. Thank you.
But I think you handle the ones that do come in, and some of them you forgive them, some of them you don't.
yeah, I mean, we give everyone, like I said, the
Right.
opportunity to appeal the citation. And we're not perfect. There are some times, and sometimes how our ambassadors, how we train them and how we interpret the ordinances, because we're trying to enforce the ordinances. And sometimes there's a very fine line of, what someone assumes may be a citation and what someone would not. So we give them that opportunity to appeal. Our staff is very good about, de-escalating if someone comes in. We try to explain the situation, explain the rules. We just had one yesterday that came in. She was very upset, and by the time she got done, she was like, okay, it wasn't that bad, and I get it, I did it wrong, so, but it's just one of those, it's letting them have a voice, and we understand that, and just making sure that they understand what the rules are.
I've had several calls this week alone from business owners or real estate agents, contractors that they may not live on the island, they may stay off the island, but they have businesses on the island. And I know that we as a council are trying to work on a business registration that will hopefully give them some type of decal for reentry. But I think they are calling your office wanting passes for their employees in case we, were to encounter a tropical storm this season. They're already concerned. They want to be prepared on how to get back onto the island. So, you may have a builder that has, 15, employees that will go back after a storm and start rechecking their homes, and they want to go ahead and be prepared to get their employees on the beach as soon as possible to, board up any damage that could have, might have happened. So if that's something that, maybe you and Kyle can get together and, try to put some more education out there as far as, this we are working on it, and it is going to happen, for those contractors.
Yeah, we could definitely, we do that with some other locations where we have contractor, passes specifically for those type of situations, so we can definitely work on a potential solution.
Yeah, I think we can do that when we do the business registration.
Yeah, so we'll be
The
able to,
contractors are supposed to be registered too. And then I think we could issue them maybe paper reentry forms, but the only time those reentry forms could be used would be during,
for that event.
yeah.
Yeah, and we do have a written policy for reentry. So property managers are able to get reentry passes. We have specific language that directs that how Pivot can manage that process, and also too just having the reentry data back from them. Councilman Torres, we did look at sort of how we are standing up to our citizenry essentially on the island. And we looked at extracting address points, making a very basic assumption, and I think it was somewhere around 30+%, as far as hurricane reentry issuance. So already we know that we're going to push a campaign again for hurricane reentry. We talked maybe have a physical in-person, you come and register at the location, you leave with a reentry pass. Would that motivate some people to do it? We don't know. I think it's Mr. Horn has been dealing with this for a couple of years now, and it really, people try to push it off in their mind until the event occurs. So if we can be proactive with that, we will. And having that number and that data has been very beneficial. I've talked with the realtors. They had an association meeting, and one of the concerns was parking. And I told them that, if you're showing a house or something and there's no parking in the driveway, and you have to park on the right of way, if you get that ticket, just let the town know. Those are going to be one-offs, because I gave an option to have a reciprocal pass that they could go to a central office and pick up if they felt like they needed to go to the island and show a property and couldn't get the parking in the driveway. But they elected that we would treat these as one-off, and I haven't heard anything back since. So I think that hopefully has been taken care of. We talked to Pivot. We understand that contractors, a lot of times they like to put the dumpster right in the driveway, so there's no parking. So I think that the ambassadors know to monitor that. If they're pulling tools from a van or a truck, fine. If they pull their surfboard, that might be something different. So I guess I just say that a constant communication, I think, has been good with Pivot to address these issues that come up, and then things that can be put into policy. We certainly try to do that. And then, of course, the signage is something that we'll continuously try to work on and increase for our parking areas.
Yeah. I believe everybody would agree, though, if they can get their hurricane reentry passes
Yes,
for their
yes.
contractors early,
Yes.
that would be a big help, because it's crazy.
We also said this year that we would continue to honor the key cards, so
Yep.
it may be a deterrence from getting the sticker or going through that process, as they can still continue to use the key card for this hurricane season. So that could be affecting the numbers from what we're seeing as well.
It could be. But
Yeah,
still, like I say,
We've
you know how
gotten
it
several
is.
that have come into the office to, register for parking, and then we say, do you also need a hurricane reentry? Go, no, I have my key card. So we have to explain that, while it may be good for this season, the intent is it may not be good for next season, so you need to register.
But you know how hectic it is with all the contractors coming in trying to get.
Yes, and we
Re-entry
bounced back and
passes.
forth with defining the term of contractor, and the process that we ran into with Florence is, we had a lot of passes that were out there for contractors that were not vetted. So the idea inside of not handing out contractor passes is they would be able to get one before the event, if the event was named, or during the event that would be event specific. So just because you had the authority to go, or the authorization to go work on someone's specific property for this event, and we give you a decal, you may not have that same authorization had we had a storm 2 months later. But if we give you the decal, then you would still have the ability to go and come as you want, even though that may not be the case at that time. So
Yeah, I
we were
wasn't talking
trying
about
to.
a decal. I was talking about, like, okay, give Ward Realty.
Yeah.
Mr. Ward would be able to get decals because he is a real estate agent, broker, with a defined list of homes that he has or his agency has. It's just contractor specific, would be vetted just for the event.
All right.
But yeah,
Has a question.
Another thought is, we had an event last week where the parking at a house was filled up, but now the repair guys looked into it, and they didn't want to get a ticket parked on the side of the road. We got a solution.
Yeah, so again, if that would fall in the same category, that if they're there to do the repairs and the only option is to park on the right of way, our ambassadors are trained to identify that. So assuming that your repair van has Ward Realty on it. Okay, so, that's something that they're gonna have to look at, and, if that situation comes up and a ticket is issued, we can certainly try to address it through the appeals process. But just as a, information, because if anybody is listening to this or wants to come back in the future, the property management companies get up to 10 passes. So basically, what we are looking for is a company letterhead with those individuals listed out, and then we will get those issued to them in advance of the storm. That's good for the season. The contractors have 48 hours up to the event landfall to come and get a hang tag or a reentry pass, not a decal. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
And Mr. Mayor, I will note, this was, Pivot provides us the numbers from their operation. What I wanted to do was just give you a very basic overview of what the actual fiscal, outlook is and where we're at. So if you'll notice, this is broken up into revenues, expenses that are Pivot expenses, and then the town's expenses, which at the bottom gives you your net income realized after all of that has been taken out. So, ultimately June was a weather month for us that sort of deterred beach activities. So we did see a drop in what our budgeted revenues were. But from a strictly budget standpoint, we had exceeded those projections, and Pivot's expenses in that second bar graph you'll see is in the negative because they did not expend what they had thought that they would, which is positive for me to see. And then really what the big kicker was these initial startup costs in regards to parking lot preparation, clearing land, hiring contractors to deliver rock. Those are pretty big costs for us. So that number was $190,840. We would absolutely expect that number to be severely reduced next year as we continue this program, because a lot of the startup costs will be minimized. We will have maintenance costs, et cetera. And that line item is established to pull from that. But I did want to show this as sort of the mid-season review and where the town sits with it. So again, just some initial growing pains, but we'll get through those and hopefully start realizing what we need to realize to fund the gap for our beach nourishment project that we have budgeted for and have looked for this future projections. So.
Anything else?
No, if you have any specific questions on this stuff, just let me know. Dave couldn't be here today if you needed to dig into it, but of course, we'll get you answers if I can't be that source for you.
Okay. Advisory board, what was it? Oh, handbook. Advisory committee handbook.
Yes, so for our advisory committees, currently, we have been operating under a very limited scope as to what the general rules and procedures are. So this handbook takes a look at putting all of the advisory boards into one handbook together. It would be a good mechanism for us to be able to give onboarding members as they come to volunteer their time for the town. I'll just briefly go through it and then ask if you guys have questions. The excerpts from the front are general statutes as to open meetings law, the same open meetings law and public records law that govern this board as well do govern all of our advisory boards. They are all open to the public and they all have minutes that are of record. As far as the boards and commissions in general, this is out of our current ordinance that we currently have. that is online for anybody to view, and then it breaks down per committee. The Beautification and Enhancement Committee, they have been working themselves very hard over the past few months to do some updates of their own. And then there's just a little bit more added to it. This is a general consensus as to what other boards or other beautification and enhancement committees throughout the state, how they're governed as well. The Board of Adjustment is, it operates off of general statutes, so this is just pulled straight from the North Carolina general statutes. Let's see, that's kind of a long one as it's a quasi judicial. Parks and Rec Committee, they lasted their update on 12/15 of 2020. What you see under them for their rules of procedure is exactly what the board themselves has voted on and been operating on, so there's no standard changes there. The only change comes with the planning board. As you'll see, it comes from section 13 within our current ordinance. The amendment would be to section 13(1-1) through 13(1-6). It just gives a little bit more formal procedure for the planning board. A lot of their statutes, or excuse me, a lot of their rules are governed by general statutes, and then sections 13.2 and 13.3, those were added at the end of 2020 as recommended by the Community Development Department. So I will take questions if you guys have any questions of the committee handbook.
Anybody got any questions on the handbook?
I think it's a good move to put some consistency into it so that we
Yeah.
all know it and be able to give it to each one of the citizens that's certainly volunteers so they know the expectations of it.
It will require an ordinance amendment, so I will be putting in for that ordinance amendment if I have a consensus in for the August meeting.
Do we have a consensus?
Yes.
Not a vote, but just a consensus. Okay? All right. Advisory Board appointment considerations is Rush Lindsay has requested to be appointed to the Parks and Rec Board. He was on Beach Nourishment, but wishes to be moved to Parks and Rec. Do I have a motion to
I'll make a
accept?
motion, we accept him.
I
Second.
second that motion.
All in favor, raise your hand. So moved. And that left an opening on Beach Nourishment. And George Howard applied for that. So do we have,
I make a motion, we appoint George Howard to the Beach Renourishment Committee.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okey-doke. Resolution to effects date of hearing. Okay. You want to explain what it is, Stephanie?
Yes, sir. So at our last meeting on July the 6th, the board made a motion to move forward with the annexation request for Lindley Properties on Highway 50. Due to a scheduling conflict with the planning board being the same week as the council meeting, we did not make the agenda for the planning board. They are the board that sets the zoning classification for the annexation. So we will make their their August meeting, which will push our public hearing for annexation to September. So I just need the resolution reapproved to set the public hearing for the September regular meeting, the first Tuesday of the month at 4:30, so that we can get that advertised and the neighboring property owners notified.
Do I have a motion on that?
I make a motion, we reset that date till the date she needed in August.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Have we got anything else to come before the board? Kyle?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, I think that's it.
Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I knew that's what it was. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, you are adjourned.